Okay. Good morning, everyone. On set and on Zoom. Thank you for attending this new policy dialogue series 2023 to 2024, hosted by Division of Public Policy at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology and Department of Social Science and Policy Study and Academy of Hong Kong Studies at the Education University of Hong Kong. For school, I'm the associate professor and acting head of the Department of Social Science and Policy Study at EdUHK. I'm extremely honored to be the moderator of this session with 4 distinguished speakers here. And this is the opening session. This is the first session of the new policy dialogue series. For those who are new to this policy dialogue series, I want to say a few words to introduce the background. And this policy dialogue series was originally launched by Professor Anthony Zhang in 2028 when he ended his service as the Secretary for Transport Housing and also returned to academia to become the research professor in public administration at the Education University of Hong Kong. Now, inspired by his work experience of working in academia, government, legislative council, he came up with this idea to launch the policy dialogue series to provide forum for decision makers, for academic researchers, and also practitioners to discuss and debate the pressing policy issues facing Hong Kong and also the region. Now, this is the first session of this new policy dialogue series, and the theme of the new session is Hong Kong into a new future, reflect, renew, and reinvigorate. And the theme of this session is Hong Kong's economic challenges, opportunities, human and financial capital, innovation, and technologies. And actually, before I come to this dialogue, I did some kind of homework. It's quite interesting that this is the first time that economic issues become the first session of policy dialogue series. I checked with the past dialogue series. It seems that in the past, we have covered a lot of topics about the political system, one country, two system, transport, crisis management, pandemic, youth, and so on and so forth. And now, if you look at the opening session in the past dialogue series in 2018 and 2019, the first session is on political system. Now, the next year, the first session is on one country, two system. The third year, the first session is still two system. The fourth year, the first session is one country, two system, retreat or reboot. And also last year, the first session is about pandemic. This year, the first session is about economic growth, and also, interestingly, one country system will be the final session in this policy dialogue series. I'm not sure whether this is the deliberate choice of Professor Anthony Zhang. But to me, I think this is quite coincident with what we are standing now. On the one hand, so after political social dimension in Hong Kong have temporarily subsided, now I think so we are now facing a quite relatively stable and relaxing environment to discuss economic issues regarding growth, income, employment, and so on and so forth. And also, on the other hand, as mentioned in the introduction of this policy dialogue series, now after the pandemic, the economic recovery in Hong Kong is below our expectation. I think people are becoming worried about the long-term financial health of the city. So whether the Hong Kong government will have enough money to support the long-term sustainable development of the city. And then I think it's now a good timing for us to reflect on Hong Kong's economic future and also how should Hong Kong strategize to meet new challenges and capture new opportunities. And so today we are extremely honored to have 4 speakers. And then the first speaker, the rundown of this policy dialogue series in the first session will be like this. The first speaker will be Professor Anthony Zhang. He's currently the advisor with the Department of Social Science and Policy Study at the Education University of Hong Kong, and the adjunct professor with the Division of Public Policy of the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And then the second speaker will be Professor Sun Yuving, and he will join this discussion via Zoom. And he is Associate Director of the Joint Shanghai-Hong Kong Development Institute between the Chinese University of Hong Kong and Fudan University. He is the Associate Director of the Economic Research Center at the Hong Kong Institute of Asian Pacific Study and Adjunct Professor of the Economic Development at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And then the third speaker will be Dr. Wendy Hong Wen, and she is currently legislative council member for the election committee constituency. She also has the experience of working at Hong Kong as a government and also in the business sector. And the final speaker will be Professor Wei Da-le, and he's the adjunct research professor at the Department of Social Science and Post-Study at EdUHK, and also was the former vice president of research and development of the EdUHK. And I think each speaker will speak around 15 minutes, and then it is followed by a Q&A session. And I will take the advantage of being the moderator, and then to maybe raise some kind of question to the four speakers, and then I will open the floor to the participant on site and also on Zoom. Okay, without further ado, we may hand over to Professor Andrew.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Fox, for your introduction. As you have pointed out, this is the first time in the Policy Dialogue series that we start a series, an annual series, with a topic on the economic issues. And indeed, I think the greatest challenge in front of Hong Kong right now is economic. Of course, the solution is not entirely an economic one, because we know there are many factors contributing to the current economic situation. Some might be social, others might be political, geopolitical. So as a first speaker, let me provide an overview of the challenges, the problems and opportunities that Hong Kong is facing. And I'm sure other speakers will then focus on some specific aspects. The key points at the beginning. First of all, Hong Kong is at a very critical economic crossroads. We have been through COVID, and we have been through the 2019 political unrest. And both the political unrest and the COVID pandemic have serious impact on Hong Kong's economy. Now, after the pandemic, at one point, people were hopeful that we would have a very speedy recovery, revenge consumption, revenge tourism, but that has not so far materialized. So recovery has been slower than expected, but still is going. But at the same time, we face the double whammy of, first of all, a rather sluggish economic situation worldwide, and also more significantly, economic troubles on the mainland. We talk about that later on. And politically, we face, in my view, a rather challenging image and branding problem. What is meant by Hong Kong? What is meant by one country, two systems? How could Hong Kong do better under the new environment? The geopolitics are getting more adverse, more challenging for Hong Kong and other places as well. And it is fair to assume that such geopolitics are becoming the new normal. So we have to work on the basis of that kind of geopolitics. Internally, Hong Kong also faces major bottlenecks in three factors of production: land, labor including talent, and capital. At the same time, we need reflection on our economic strategy. We need, government is talking about re-industrialization. We need a proper strategy. We need not just a strategy, not just a plan, but also the transformation of the ecosystem that supports such a direction. We have been talking about very frequently the grooming of an innovation and technology hub. And what does that mean? I'll talk about that towards the end of my presentation. So these are the key points to start with. The global situation. I think it's fair to say that the world, Asia, China, in terms of the economy, are all slowing down. If we look at the world, I think the situation can be summarized by the latest IMF report on World Economic Outlook, published in October this month. Global recovery remains slow, with growing regional divergencies, and little margin for policy error. So we are in a rather critical situation. IMF has scaled down slightly the growth rate. So it's predicting that we have 3.0% growth this year and 2.9% next year. But when that report was published, it was before the latest crisis in the Middle East, the Israeli-Palestine conflict. So perhaps the figures will scale down further later on. But such figures around 3.0 is in fact well below the historical average of 3.8 over the last 2 decades. So the situation worldwide is not too optimistic. But with that as the background, there is a disproportionate share of global growth coming from Asia. So Asia is becoming very important. According to IMF, a report in May this year, Asia contributes about 70% of global growth this year. So we can see the importance of Asia increasing. Now, for China, there are two views based on the various observations. The pessimistic view is that China's boom is over. China is in great trouble, breakdown of the economy. But there is a more cautious view suggesting that yes, China has some troubles, notably the real estate crisis. But in terms of consumption, China is still growing. So the IMF view in July this year was that China's growth will mainly be driven by consumption, which may, to some extent, negate the underperformance in investment due to real estate downturn. So it's a rather mixed picture. But by and large, we can say that because Asia is so important, and China certainly is very important, not just for the world, but also for Asia, because the major partners of China are all in Asia. And for ASEAN, China is the largest trading partner. So both the world and Asia cannot afford China's economy to shrink. I think that's the situation the whole world is facing. Asia. For those of you who are interested, you may read a report published by McKinsey in September, a very good report about Asia. Basically, the points are Asia is trying to reach out to both China and the US. Asia doesn't want to side with either of them alone. Asia resists decoupling. And Asia also has achieved rather significant capital deepening. And I think that's important as we look into the future of Hong Kong within Asia. And Asia has and will continue to have the largest share of global investment, 40% of the global total. In terms of growth this year and next year, both IMF and the World Bank have predicted a rather modest growth rate. But of course, there are risks, as in all economies. So back to Hong Kong. I think for Hong Kong, we are on the major figures. We are having a rather mixed picture. On the one hand, there are great concerns about growth. Now, the government forecasted growth of 4.0% to 5.0% for this year, earlier this year. But I suppose the actual outturn might well be lower than those figures. But those figures are growth figures for this year compared to the last year, 2022. And last year was terrible. Last year we had negative 3.5% compared to the year before, that is 2021. So even if we could achieve 4.0%, we are still not too well off because we are comparing with the terrible year last year. Stock market, I think everybody is talking about we're having a rather disappointing performance in the stock market, the worst performing in 2022. And despite new measures announced in the policy address, the market hasn't really responded too positively. Market capitalization remains large compared to Singapore, for example. We are several times Singapore's. However, if we look at Hong Kong's market capitalization over the years, I think there should be concern. IPO fundraising, we hit the lowest level for 11 years, according to a latest report. In terms of investment, foreign direct investment, FDI. Now, FDI has been declining, on the decline. And in terms of investment, actually, we have been relying more and more on FDI outflow from the mainland of China. Now, if China's economy is not doing well, then we will be directly affected. So that's why I think, despite this mixed picture, I think we should not be, quite concerned about the kinds of situation we are now in. Property market is on a downturn, and that affects land sales. It also affects the wealth effect. The latest stamp duty relaxation measures announced by the government, will that help? So far, it's uncertain, because the market hasn't really shown a very strong response in the positive sense. As far as government is concerned, the view is that inbound tourism and private consumption will remain the major drivers of economic growth for the rest of this year. And we can see private consumption accounting for some 70% of Hong Kong's nominal GDP. Now, tourism, I think we are gradually back to closer to the pre-pandemic level, 80% in terms of numbers. But numbers doesn't mean economic contribution, so we have to go beyond that. Retail sales are picking up gradually. In June, it has increased by almost 20% compared to last year. So we can say that it is on a path of gradual recovery. Consumer spending, again, is increasing last quarter compared to the first quarter of this year. And unemployment rate is at an historical low of 2.8%. So these figures suggest that, well, we need not be too pessimistic, but we need to be very concerned about the challenges before us. And the government is very keen in promoting Hong Kong's attraction to outsiders, from Hello Hong Kong to Hong Kong Night Vibes campaigns. So that's the situation. So what about the future? Now, I think we have, of course, our advantage. As far as Hong Kong is concerned, over the decades, we are good in people, market, and location. But we are experiencing setback in some aspects among these major factors. We have been noted for our can-do entrepreneurial spirit. Now, is that spirit still there? I think that's the question. Our hub advantage, we have an excellent global connectivity, aviation, shipping, whatever. And we are not short of entrepreneurs or capital to a large extent. We have world-class universities. So these are strengths. And the government is keen to promote Hong Kong as an international center of innovation and technology with central government presence. However, because of the mainland economic troubles, because of the gloomy global economy, I think we need to consider whether our historical advantages are still working in our favor. In terms of competitiveness, we are gradually on a decline. We are not losing our competitiveness. We are on a decline compared to others. Others are picking up. In terms of global financial center, we have lost to Singapore. Also in terms of #1 free economy. Of course, there might not be a very substantial difference between #1 and #2 or #3 for that matter. I'm the World Competitiveness Ranking. Hong Kong has fallen to 7th, behind Singapore and Taiwan, but ahead of Sweden and USA. In terms of national competitiveness, compared to cities within China, we are #3, according to one survey, behind Beijing and Shanghai, but ahead of Shenzhen. So it's again a rather mixed picture. We have to consider, in terms of strategy, what should be the driver for Hong Kong's economic growth into the future. In the past, we have relied a lot on finance. We have relied a lot on real estate. Now, from now on, I don't think we should put too much, bet too much hope on real estate. In terms of finance, we are facing fierce competition. And because our financial center has been heavily dependent on mainland corporations and investment. Now, if that has any significant change in the coming years, the local stock market, the local financial center will be affected. And then the bottlenecks in labor, land, and capital. And ironically, our challenges and opportunities are two sides of the same coin. First of all, our future lies in a rising China and a rising Asia. But at the same time, we cannot afford to be isolated from the West and lose our historical advantage. So we are in the past, we are in the best of both worlds. Now we are in a rather ambiguous situation. If we are not careful, we might be caught in the trap of being in the worst of both worlds. Our future certainly lies in China. But that also means that our economy, ups and downs, will be affected more closely by the ups and downs of the mainland economy. Are we able to diversify beyond the national landscape? I think that is also a question for us to consider. Talking about fostering an innovation and technology hub, yes, that's important. But Hong Kong alone cannot do that. We must leverage, we must partner with other cities on the mainland, particularly in the Greater Bay Area, GBA. So how do we leverage our existing strengths in finance, in the professional competence, and also the GBA? I think that is the question. In any case, the need to re-industrialize depends a lot on our willingness to change mindsets and skills. As I said at the beginning, we have to take the new geopolitics as the new normal. So how do we conceptualize our intermediary role in that kind of new normal? Because it seems that as geopolitics become more adverse, then if you're too close to the West, you might feel you are not having an advantage towards the other side, and vice versa. The mainland of China is becoming the main supplier of talent and capital. I think that's a fact we have to work on. But again, that is subject to economic conditions there. But we need to go beyond the national to the international. So the immediate challenge is mainly economic, which affects Hong Kong public finance, and also our ability to invest in infrastructure and human capital. But the solution lies tightly in politics. How to improve our international perceptions, for example, under the national security law. Can we continue to impress the outside world that Hong Kong is still a city of imagination, possibilities, and best practices? Because time is running out, maybe I just talk about the talent question and innovation and technology very briefly. On talent question, the government is on a very ambitious scheme to attract talent, outside talent. But if you look at the figures, under the top talent pass scheme, actually 95% of the new talent is coming from the mainland. So we are not that attractive to other countries. So I think we have to reflect on that. So the questions are, Hong Kong, of course, Hong Kong is a free city. People come in, people can leave anytime they want. There are various factors explaining that. But we are certainly having a rather steady brain drain. I think that is something that we should not take lightly. Although there are some Chinese scientists relocating to Hong Kong from the US, for example, because they feel the pressure, political pressure particularly, in the US. But we should not take that as enough compensation. I think we have to reflect on why we are losing talent. We should be ambitious in grabbing new talent. At the same time, we must not lose sight of the importance of retaining talent. And an important point is talent is attracted by talent. So if we are not good in retaining talent, then outside talent may wonder, why should we come to Hong Kong? If the local talent, these people are leaving. So are we doing enough to retain local talent? And within our education system, our local professional training programs, are we grooming the right productivity to support our attempt, our goal of fostering an innovation and technology hub? On the issue of Hong Kong reinventing itself as an innovation and technology hub, I think the starting point is we have a lot to catch up. We are well behind some other cities, both on the mainland and international. And grooming and IMT hub needs more than money and talent. We need an ecosystem. And is that ecosystem in place now? If not, what more should be done? In universities, we encourage people to work towards the application of innovation and technology. And the market force is still important. I think we must not over-rely on the state, on the government, as the major driver of growth in this aspect. Ultimately, it's the market. So are there the right incentives within the market that will attract private enterprises, in particular local large private enterprises, to go into INT? And then the collective nature of innovation requires government to play a proactive role, of course, in terms of research and development. So we face a rather difficult situation right now, which is alarming. We have good plans, very ambitious plans, but all these plans, whether or not they would deliver performance, depends on a variety of factors. So I will stop there, and then I'm sure other speakers will take some of these issues into greater detail. Thank you very much.
The very good summary of the macroeconomic political environment that Hong Kong is now facing. Now, may I now invite Professor Shen to deliver his lecture?
Unmute and okay. Can you hear me clearly? Okay, yeah. If my voice drop, please alert me. Okay. Yeah, I will use share screen and we'll go right to the presentation in the interest of time. Okay. Yeah. The title of my presentation is Hong Kong Economy Under Regime Change. And let's see. Okay, I start with the external environment. I mean the mega trends, okay, that has a particular impact on Hong Kong's economy. Well, this is the end of what we call a Pax Americana, the end of hyper-globalization, and also the end of global high growth, okay. End of Pax Americana means more big power conflicts. I mean, we have wars in Ukraine and Palestine, more political risk, more uncertainty, and also disruptions of the supply chain. Rise of anti-globalization that Hong Kong and also the mainland have been chief beneficiaries of hyper-globalization. In fact, also of Pax Americana. I mean, but the age has passed. Okay. And we have slowdown of global growth. We have a global labor shortage. That we have a slow population growth, not only in developed countries, but also in East Europe and a lot of industrializing countries, such as China and so on, exacerbated by workers suffering from long COVID, exacerbated by anti-globalization and geopolitical risk. I mean, all this, cut down, global growth. And all these factors hit Hong Kong, which a very open economy, highly dependent on the world market, particularly hard. Labor shortage in Hong Kong, and in fact also in the mainland. Labor shortage in Hong Kong has also been exacerbated by immigration due to the NSL and also the 2019 political turmoil. Well, the 2023 post-COVID recovery rapidly ran out of steam. And here I have a graph of price index of private residential property. The index close to 400 points in mid-2019 before the political turmoil, and then it dropped. But then in 2022, when COVID was well controlled both in the mainland and in Hong Kong, the index rose to 400 and reached a peak of close to 400. But then it dropped to 334, dropped by 16% at the end of 1922 due to the triple whammy of COVID, high interest rates, and immigration. And then, end of COVID controls, late 22 and early 23, there was euphoria. And, but in terms of domestic residential property price, which is a good indicator of sentiments and confidence, you see that it only results in a very minor blip. Rebounded by 5.8% in the first four months. And then after April, it dropped again. My slide says it dropped by 4.2% by August, end of August. But then just yesterday, after I finished all these slides, the September figures were out and it further declined, such that, all the gain in the early 4 months have been evaporated, and mild rebound by 5.8%, but then by September, it dropped by 6.2%, 6.2%. So by end of September, property prices were lower than that of end of last year. Widely expected to decline further in 2024, and people are talking about 30% decline, in property prices from the peak. Once the short-lived euphoria over ending of COVID control evaporates, the gravity of the many structural problems of the Hong Kong economy have been fully exposed. Okay. Recent spate of bad economic news. Exports dropped by 12% something. Finance, till very recently, the fastest growing industry of Hong Kong for a decade, performed badly in the last 2 years. Hong Kong's rank in IPO slipped from number 3 last year to number 8 in the first 3 quarters, behind in Indonesia. Stock market capitalization fell 40%, so a lot of wealth evaporated. Okay. First half of 2023 land sales, a major source of government revenue, only 19% of target. So the financial secretary lately is saying that the budget deficit this year will be much larger. It will be probably be over 100 billion. Property market price continue to be depressed. Okay. The weak economic performance of Hong Kong, I mean, is kind of long term. I mean, has been for 2 decades. Okay, we start with 2003, Hong Kong's recovery from SARS, right after Asian financial crisis. Per capita GDP of Hong Kong and Singapore were similar. And by 2022, Singapore GDP was 50% higher per capita. And also seriously, there was a slowdown in average annual growth rate of Hong Kong's labor productivity from 3.3% in the decade, first decade after 2000 to 2.1% in the second decade. Reason for slowdown, I mean, maybe talent and labor outflow, labor shortage, lack of investment, shortage of land, and lack of innovation. I mean, all these are possible. And there was long term. We just talk about long term economic performance, which was weak. And how about short term, especially since 2019? I mean, the political disturbance and COVID, and it was especially bad. Well, it was bad worldwide because the whole world, I mean, was affected by COVID. But if you talk about real economic growth from 2018 to 2023, I mean, the whole world suffered from COVID. The real economy grew by 13%, Singapore by 11%, so quite close to the world average. China grew by 27%, much better than the world average. But end of 2023, these are estimates, of course. I mean, year 2023 has not yet ended, but given that it is now October, I mean, the estimates should be quite close. Hong Kong, we assume a growth rate of 5% in 2023 for Hong Kong. But even if the Hong Kong economy recover by 5% in real terms, in 2023, the Hong Kong GDP will still be nearly 1% lower than that in 2018, which was 5 years back. Okay. So Hong Kong performed much worse than the whole world. Despite COVID, the world economy has fully recovered from COVID, and it is now 13% higher than the pre-COVID. Hong Kong is still 1%. Okay. By the end of this year, it will still be something like 1% less than that in 2018. So 5 years ago. Okay, Hong Kong suffer badly from COVID because they are mostly a service-oriented economy, and trade in services are much more affected than trade in goods because COVID controls largely affect trade in services, which require person-to-person contacts. And okay. Labor, we have shrinking population and emigration. You talk about births and deaths and natural change starting from mid-2019 to mid-22 and then mid-23. Mid-23 was the latest factor. We first talk about the change from 19 to 22. Natural change was negative 39,000 because deaths exceed births. And then one-way permit, we get net inflows, but other net movement, mostly emigration, close to 180,000. So net movement of 132,000. So the population by mid-22 shrank. Mid-23, we have the COVID recovery, and that's better. natural growth of population still negative. One-way permit has gone up because of phasing out of COVID controls. And the net movement swung from negatives to huge positive, okay, close to 143,000. And so Hong Kong population gained by close to 150,000. It was all in the press. But if you analyze the figures, it was mostly gain of, distinguished between what we call usual residents and mobile residents. The gain of 150,000 is mostly in mobile residents, okay? Kind of Hong Kong students returning to visit. For example, or just Hong Kong residents who usually reside overseas in Canada or in the mainland, returning to Hong Kong for less than 3 months. Okay, the definition of mobile resident is residing in Hong Kong less than 3 months in a year. Okay, which may be returning students in a summer vacation and what have you. Okay, and Hong Kong residents who usually live overseas will be returning. So the gain of 150,000, 100,000 is mobile residents. There is 50,000 gain in permanent residents. Okay, but one-way permit is already 31,000. So the gain in usual residents is not large. In fact, quite small. And all evidence is that net emigration, I mean, people emigrating due to lack of confidence in Hong Kong is still quite severe. I mean, from BNO statistics and so on. We may have a rapidly aging population. In the interest of time, I will go fast. Okay, so if you look at the young age group, you get huge negatives. If you look at the all age groups, people retiring above 60, above 80, okay, we get huge gains. Rapidly aging population. And we have a shrinking labor force, and I will also skip that, okay, the statistics are all here. Recent rebound mainly due to end of COVID controls, which is a one-off effect, okay. Rebounded by 2.4% or 90,000 by July of 23. But of course, it is still way below the peak of 4 million back in 2019. Future trends will largely depend on net immigration, how successful the government is in importing labor and attracting talents. And we have bottlenecks also in capital, inadequate investment. Hong Kong has a lot of financial capital. But if you look at investment in machinery, equipment, and IP products, which are what matters, you look at year 2012 to year 22, that is total investment in machinery, equipment, and IP products. We distinguish between the private and the public sector. And you see that 2012 investment is this March, it was close to 14% of GDP. And by year 2022, it shrank nearly half in absolute terms. And it shrank to 5.1% of GDP. And more seriously, if you look at the distinguish the public sector and private sector, you look at investment in plant and equipment and IP products in the public sector, government investment. It keeps going up all the time. Okay, government investment doubled in absolute terms. In terms of GDP, it also go up from 1% to 1.5%. So the government has made a lot of efforts in investing in innovation, technology, what have you, in R&D, research and development, funding university research, RTC grants, and what have you. But despite all this expansion in public investment in technology, the private sector is not responding at all. Okay. Investment in the private sector shrank by 60% in absolute terms. And as a percentage of GDP, it was only 1/3, less than a third of what it was in 2012. So all this government effort in technology, in science park, in what have you, is not working. The private sector is not responding. Reason, maybe misdirected government investment. The business model may be inappropriate. Okay. All these RTC research funds may not be fruitful. And private investors may not invest because of geopolitical risk, despite the government is doing a lot. Okay. And it is an important factor in the slowdown in Hong Kong's labor productivity that we referred to, in the beginning. Okay, all negatives, there are some recent positive signs. Okay, government has done a lot. Okay. Recovery lost steam in just a few months. The effect of recent government policies for more growth should have long-term effects. Spate of government policies to build mega infrastructure, to attract talents, attract strategic high potential enterprise, regional headquarters, incoming tourists, import labor, promote fertility, stimulate property and stock market transactions, foster technology, and to promote competitiveness and so on. And all these are efforts in the right direction. And it is too early to assess results of such policies. Okay. As we said, if you look at the macro private investment, it is not responding at all. According to the latest figures we have. But there are some positive signs. What are those? Well, if you look at the rental index of Grade A office space in Hong Kong, in the central and so on, it declined by 50% from the 2019 peak to June 23rd, just a few months ago. It declined by 50%. Rebounded by 1.4% in the last 2 months, okay? July and August. Not last 2 months, but the last 2 months that we have data. So our 1.4% rebound, which is not large, but bear in mind, in comparison, the end of COVID 2-month rebound early this year in office rental was only 0.7%. So in the last 5 months, we never get larger than 1% rebound in office rental. The end of COVID rebound was only 0.7%, but in the last 2 months, we have a rebound of greater than 1.4%. So that is unprecedented in the last 5 years. Despite the 2019 turmoil, Hong Kong has remained highly attractive to mainland students. Okay, so the university should know. Number of non-local students in EdUHK, gone up by 32% to 21,000 something. 3/4 of mainland. And there are reports from real estate agents that incoming mainland talents, non-students, have beat up the rental in residential markets lately. So lately, in the residential market, residential rents has gone up by 7 months this year. Excepting January, since February to August, residential rents have gone up, despite the fact that property prices have gone down, mostly. Property price, by now, has gone down to the lowest point in the last 5 years, whereas residential rents has gone up to the highest point in the last 4 years. Okay. And most of the gain was just this few months. Okay. Rentals to mainland students and also to non-students, okay, from talents. You know that the government has approved a lot of mainland talents to come to Hong Kong. More than 6, I think the latest statistics, more than 60,000 of them have already availed themselves of the approval to come to Hong Kong. But we are not sure how long they are staying and so on. But since we are seeing an effect on the real estate rental market, so there is some positive effect. Okay, not all of them stay just for one month and then go. Okay, at least some of them are staying behind. Okay, which is good news. Well, in history, I should end. I mean, time is running out. Fundamental change in political regime, for example, decolonization in Malaysia and Singapore, have always led to painful structural adjustment that lasted a number of years, 5 years, 10 years. Hong Kong's first reversion in 1997 acceptance move, marked by continuity rather than disruption, due to a myriad of very fortunate and favorable geopolitical factors, which are now no longer so fortunate. And most of the pains of regime change or have been delayed until the second reversion of 2020. Well, geopolitical megatrends largely out of our control, but we can only adapt and adjust. And it's too early to know if we will be successful. Adjustment likely to be long, as investment in innovation and technology typically has long gestation periods. And as Professor Zhang said, we need an ecosystem conducive to high-tech development, which we don't have. And that will take a long time. Integration with GBA are likely to bring immediate relief. In fact, Hong Kong has been integrating with the GBA or the Pearl River Delta, which was called, for 40-something years since the China's opening. And most of the low-hanging fruits have already been ripped. Further fruits will take time to ripen, and it will take a long time. Well, among the supply side bottlenecks, human power and talent is the most crucial. Conclusion, as long as peace and order are preserved, and we hope that it will be, the continuing attractiveness of Hong Kong to young talents remain our strongest asset. And we have been quite attractive, especially to mainland students and mainland talents. And that is, I think, a highly positive. Thank you. Yeah. That's the end of my presentation.
For the quite objective assessment of the sluggish performance of Hong Kong's economy during the near past, which makes us maybe a little bit worrisome. Perhaps Dr. Hung can give us more confidence.
And Dr. Hu, thanks for having me in the policy dialogue. And I appreciate being included in the session together with three very, highly respected scholars today. Today, I would like to share my views on Hong Kong's role as an international financial center. In particular, I would like to talk about the Wimbledon effect in Hong Kong's financial industry and how we can overcome it. I guess there might be some tennis fans here online or on site, but even you are not a tennis lover, you must have ever heard about the Wimbledon Championship. It is the oldest and the most prestigious tennis tournament in the world. And every year in summer, London, the host city, draws international attention during the tournaments. But there's a very interesting phenomenon in the Wimbledon Championships. Actually, during the past century, UK has produced very few Wimbledon single champions. For example, since 1966, Britain's men's single players has only won Wimbledon single twice in almost 90 years. Such a phenomenon is also seen in Japan sumo wrestling. Actually, in Japan, we can see since 1998, there has been only one Japanese-born Yokozuna. This is the highest rank of professional sumo wrestling, and other top players are from outside Japan. So the term Wimbledon effect is to describe a phenomenon that although a certain city has been hosting an international event successfully, major active players are from outside. Actually, Wimbledon effect is very obvious in Hong Kong's financial sector. We always say Hong Kong is an international financial center. We call ourselves a superconductor. We are a platform for global capital flow. International financial institutions, they operate in Hong Kong and manage their relationship with the East and the West. But we can find that international financial institutions operating in Hong Kong, they have little connection with local development. And global capital flows flowing on the platform of Hong Kong, they seldom take roots locally. And we can see competitive players active in Hong Kong are basically international institutions. I cannot even point one local competitive financial institutions. I think HSBC cannot be seen as a Hong Kong one. So yeah, this is Wimbledon effect. And financial elites in Central, they need international perspective, they need national experience, but local knowledge is not a must. I once talked to a very famous fund manager in Central, and he told me he has lived in Hong Kong for more than 2 decades. He never reads local newspaper. And in his company, only 2 local staff, one for cleaning and distribution documents, another one for security. This is not rare, actually, in Central. There's one example that can demonstrate the Wimbledon effect in Hong Kong's financial sector. In 2018, Hong Kong Exchange amended our listing rules and introduced a new chapter, which is Chapter 18A. This chapter allows pre-revenue biotech companies to list on the main board. And very soon, Hong Kong attracted a lot of biotech companies. Nearly 60 biotech companies successfully listed under the Chapter 18A. And Hong Kong has, in just a few years, become the world's second largest biotech financing center. But I examined all 60 biotech companies one by one and found only 2 of them has operation in Hong Kong. They have small office in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong has become a biotech financial center, yet it has not contributed to local biotech industrial development. This is my presentation in EdUHK and the newspaper talking about the Wimbledon effect. And, it is obvious that Hong Kong as an international financial platform has no direct relationship with local developments. It is detached from the local economy. As such, Hong Kong has become a rootless international financial center. I call it 離地或者金融中心. So we can see 2 Hong Kongs in parallel universe. Hong Kong number 1 is an international financial center. It's a superconductor, but only elites can benefit. So I call it elite Hong Kong. And Hong Kong number 2 is suffering from the hollowing out economy. It's suffering from reduced upward social mobility. So I call it the mass Hong Kong. We can see the increasingly widening wealth gap between the two Hong Kong. Hong Kong, as the financial sector has contributed to Hong Kong. Actually, it is creating the highest value added in terms of per person. And the financial sector's contribution to GDP doubled just within 20 years. In 2008, the Time magazine coined a new word, Hong Kong. It is a contraction of the 3 cities, New York, London, and Hong Kong. And in their cover article, A Tale of 3 Cities, the article described the 3 cities as, the most remarkable cities in the 21st century. The 3 hubs link up the global financial system, and they share some similarities, like they are both global financial center and culture centers. that a coin has two sides. We have the gains, we also have the losses. The major loss of Hong Kong being a rootless international financial center is the overly narrowly focused economic structure. Hong Kong is evolving from an economy supported by four major pillars to a single domination by the financial sector. And the over-financialization or 金融化 is obvious in Hong Kong. Capital influx pushed up the commodities and the property prices, and economic activities that cannot produce sufficient value added being squeezed out of Hong Kong, aggregating the hollowing out of the economy. And however, the financial sector cannot provide development opportunities for all Hong Kong people. Its contribution to our employment is 7.5, if in terms of the total population is 3.5. We are now in a full employment status in Hong Kong, yet we have produced limited employment that can provide quality, opportunities for our youth to move up the social ladder. We are evolving into a wealth-driven economy, which means earning money with money is much easier than winning money with labor, which is exacerbating inequality and the social polarization in the society. People might argue that the Wimbledon effect is not unique to Hong Kong. New York, London is also, can see such phenomenon. But I think Hong Kong should not regard New York and London as our development reference, because the three cities are very, are fundamentally different. I think the word Nine Hong Kong is misleading, because New York and London, they are not independent economies. They are onshore international financial center within big economies like UK and the US. They have nature hinterland without a border, hindering the free flow of factors like people, capital, information. So their narrowly focused employment structure in these two cities, New York and London, can be supported by the whole country's overall economic base because of the free flow of population. But Hong Kong is a different story. We are an independent economy under the one country, two systems. We are an offshore international financial center of China. We have no natural hinterland, and there are borders between Hong Kong and other cities of the GBA, blocking the free flow of goods, people, information, data, etc. And the cross-border labor mobility is much easier for high-end talent, but grass population, they are more reliant on the local welfare system, and they are actually entrenched in Hong Kong. And so I believe Hong Kong should, diversify our economic structure, and our structure should be aligned, roughly with our demographic structure. And much more suitable reference for Hong Kong should be Singapore and Switzerland, Korea, etc. So I think we must overcome the Wimbledon effect in Hong Kong's financial services. We must, on top of the international perspective, adding the local perspective. We should encourage the capitals flowing on, through Hong Kong to take roots locally and promoting localized development. That means to transform Hong Kong from a rootless international financial center to a localized international financial center. To achieve that, I think we should rethink and redefine the value of international financial center. We should return to the fundamental role of the financial sector, which can be used as instruments to achieve our policy objectives. We can use the financial sector to promote and empower industrial development and the development of real economy and diversify the local economic base. To achieve that, I think in the initial step, as the initial step, we can develop some financial tools with which the government can be used to participate in shaping our economy. I have been promoting 7, areas in LegCo. The logic behind that is to use the elite Hong Kong to empower the mass Hong Kong. Time reason, I will fly over the following slides quickly, just to give you a very brief picture. The first one is to establish a government strategic investment vehicle as an entry point for change. I discussed this issue with Professor Navaja, actually. This is to take a reference from international successful experiences like Temasek in Singapore and the global group, the capital group Senchangtou in Shenzhen. This is my 5 steps in policy advocating in the LegCo. First, newspaper articles and media interviews. And I talk about this topic whenever possible in LegCo. And this is my first members' motion moved last year in June. And media interviews after the motion, and meeting with government officials, and submission proposal to the CE, and media interview before the launch of the policy address last year. Finally, the initial milestone in the last year's policy address, CE announced that we will establish the Hong Kong Investment Corporation Limited, 香港投資管理有限公司. So I think the way forward is to take forward the implementation. I have 9 specific suggestions on the future developments of Hong Kong IC. I will not skip here. So I talk about these 9 suggestions in media, in LegCo, in newspapers, and send letters to government. And I hope we can achieve something with the first step. The second step I'm promoting is the reforming Chapter 18A and Chapter 18C of listing rules. And we need to add a local dimension into our listing rules. This is why I'm talking in a seminar. The third area I'm promoting is the company domiciliation regime. The newly released policy address announced Hong Kong will introducing a mechanism to facilitate company domiciled overseas for redomiciliation to Hong Kong. I think we should add elements of local real operation in such regime. The fourth area is culture, arts, creativity, and sports financing. 文創藝體嘅金融投資體系. I think we can, take reference from sci-tech financing, including angel investing, venture capital, equity investment, etc., and adopt such a system into the culture, arts, creativity, and sports. The fifth area is intellectual property financing. Intellectual property. Yes. I think we have a lot to do in this area. The sixth area I'm promoting is the Silicon Valley Bank in Hong Kong. Yes, I'm talking about the Silicon Valley Bank, which went bankrupt in Silicon Valley early this year. But I think its failure is not because of the failure of its business model. Its failure is because of poor risk management under such a rising, interest environment. I think Hong Kong currently doesn't have a bank that specializes in serving information and technology industry. So we need Silicon Valley Bank in Hong Kong. And the last elements I'm promoting is establish a Hong Kong International Data Exchange. under digital economy, data trading has become a major factor of international trade, and Hong Kong should tap into such a trend and establish a Hong Kong International Data Exchange 国际数據交易所. This is my suggestion to CV. So conclusion, I think Hong Kong should overcome the Wimbledon effect in our financial sector to transform from a rootless international financial center to a localized international financial center. We need a paradigm shift. One important aspect of such a paradigm shift is to rethink and redefine the value of international financial center. We need to serve not only international capital flows, but also local economic structural transformation. And we need to use the elite Hong Kong to empower and drive the development of the mass Hong Kong. Thus, we can enable the local community to benefit from Hong Kong's role as an international financial center. So I will stop here and pass the.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hong, for drawing our attention to the local effect of financial sector, which has been neglected in our previous discussion on economic development, and also for showing a good example how the effective policy advocacy can be done in the reality. Now, may I now invite our final speaker, Professor Lui, to deliver his lecture.
Okay. Thank you, Fox, for moderating, and thanks to the other speakers. I think they have covered a lot of ground already, and that's why I have prepared a very, very short PPT, because I just want to make one point. Probably I only need 2 to 3 minutes. We are talking about economic challenges and opportunities. My message is very simple, that before taking up all these challenges, Hong Kong probably also need to take a good look at our own selves, so that we know really what to do next. And I just want to pick up one example. This is the official statistics on regional headquarters, regional offices, and local offices in Hong Kong between 1991 to 2022. And as you can see at the very bottom, the deeper blue section is the number of regional headquarters. And then in the middle is the regional office statistics. And starting from around 2000, we also have statistics on local offices. That is in the sharp bright green color. What I want to say? The point I want to say is, like a lot of points already raised by the 3 speakers, we have a lot of challenges. We also have a lot of issues. And my point is very simple. If you just look at number of regional headquarters, that is the key components of what the SAR government now also want to set up a workforce on the regional headquarter economy. This would be the main part of the headquarter economy, that is the regional headquarter offices, not local offices, not regional offices. And you can see that, actually the number of regional headquarters have been stagnant for quite a long time. Basically, you may say after 2009 and so on, the number has always been more or less the same. And in the past year, 2022, it's actually dropped from 1,457 to 1,411. So it dropped in terms of the absolute number of regional headquarters in Hong Kong. But the main message I want to say is, one of the, I would say, the issues that all Hong Kongers have to face nowadays is we actually have been sleepwalking for quite a long time. Before taking up the new challenges, one of the things that we need to wake up. And my message is we should have been woken up 10, 15 years ago, not just now. Because if you look at the number of regional headquarters, it's been plateaued for a long time. But somehow in our own local discussion, the funny thing is, most of the time in recent years, we would quote the aggregate number of regional headquarters, regional offices, and local offices. So as a result of that, we would be reasonably happy because, well, we're still growing steadily and we should be happy. Don't worry about what happened. But in fact, what has been really growing is actually local offices, meaning overseas company coming to Hong Kong, settlement office to manage business within Hong Kong, not in the region, not coordinating, not doing managerial major decision making and so on. And so one of the things that we need to do is to wake up and see what happened. The other thing is, if you look at the composition of these regional headquarters, which again, rather obvious that in the old days, in 1991, you can see that almost half, 43% from USA, 13% from UK, 7% from Japan, and then Netherlands, Switzerland, and so on. Of course, you could say, okay, you pick up 1991, so China is not there, is for obvious reason. Although China has already gone through economic reform, market reform, it still takes quite a little bit of time for them to go further and go reaching out. And so you don't see it. And this is the reason why you have the dominance of these American and European and Japanese corporations. And also, don't forget that I mentioned in 2022, we have 1,457 regional headquarters, but way back in 1991 is only, half of that amount is only talking about 600. So if you look at 2021, now the figures would be 1,400 something. I'm sorry that I didn't have time to further revise the number to 2022. In 2021, the higher share is shared between USA and mainland China, both 17%. But if you look at the most recent statistics, then the number of US companies having regional headquarters in Hong Kong dropped further, and then say from 244 to 212. And this is the reason why, if you look at the 2022 figure, China and US is still more or less 17-18%, but already mainland China has the largest share in terms of having regional headquarters in Hong Kong. And more importantly, as you can see, actually, the major countries coming up and setting up regional headquarters, we're still talking about American companies, European companies, Japan, and so on. Why I'm bringing this up at this point is because, okay, fair enough, nowadays we have new opportunities. Why just looking at the US? Why just looking at Europe? In the past couple of years, we have heard a lot of this kind of debate. So who cares about US companies not coming in? And we don't care at all. Okay, fine with that sort of argument. But the thing is, have we seen phenomenal growth of companies coming from Belt and Road countries and set up regional headquarters here? Well, compared with other countries, is still, I'm afraid, kind of negligible. Probably there will be growth in future, and I hope so. But the point that I want to raise is 2 points. One is, okay, even if we have more business, a more active role in Belt and Road countries, would they set up their regional headquarters in Hong Kong? Is Hong Kong the major platform? Why don't they just go straight in right away into China? Or make use of, well, Belt and Road countries themselves as well, like Singapore, to be the major center for coordination instead of Hong Kong. What are the competitive advantage of Hong Kong in doing business in Belt countries? I know, there are lots of opportunities out there, but my experience, my limited experience of traveling in, say, Kazakhstan, Pakistan, Russia, and so on, my humble experience is that the very fact that I couldn't speak Russian and I couldn't speak Arabic is a major handicap. We don't like it, but the fact that, we have been exposed to the West, and primarily we're talking about English-speaking countries. And now we want to make a major turn, then we have to ask ourselves two questions. Are we ready for it? And are we going to prepare for it? What make you more competitive with other potentially Belt and Road countries to take over all those opportunities? And my second message that I want to raise is, okay, fine, we don't see them on the pie chart in 2021, in 2022, fine. What about 5 years down the road? Would we set up KPIs so that, by, say, 2027, then at least we should have, say, 5%, 10% of these regional headquarters will be coming from the Middle East, and another 5% is coming from South Asia, and then more from other Southeast Asian countries. If this is the target, what are the things that we need to do so that we would be able to make it? I think the message I want to get across is, I know when I make this point, it sounds sarcastic, because the point I want to make is, hey, let's set up KPIs. We need to measure that whether we are really on the right track to ensure that we would pick a bigger role in Belt and Road countries, we would be more influential in Southeast Asia, ASEAN countries, we would put our hands into South Asia, and then we would be able to make benefits out of it. And tell me what are the KPIs, tell me the pathways, and tell me how we progress along the years. Perhaps need to take a longer turn, but still, 5 years, 10 years, what kind of picture would we expect in the same pie chart? I think we need to do that. I said it sounds sarcastic is because the current SAR government is a big fan of KPI. Theoretically, I think we don't need to ask them to set KPI in order to make all the decision makings. But at the same time, the sort of worries that I have is that we have a lot of new workforce, new ideas all over the places. In the past 2 years, we have a lot in the policy address. I support any initiative because we need to have major change, but at the same time, well, maybe 1 year later, maybe 3 years later, we do need to take stock of what happened, what are the more productive measures, what are the more cost-effective measures. At the end of the day, we need to make sure that, the economy is really responding. And that's why I think Yunming has raised a very important point is we have not been making investments in machineries and so on enough. But at the same time, if we disaggregate the statistics, it's even more important for us to notice that, the market's still not responding. Private investment is not only not growing, is not doing well. The new investment coming in primarily coming from the government. And at the end of the day, we need to know whether this is efficient measures, productive measures, and if we want to have our economy to make a major turnaround, I do think that we need to, one, to have the market to respond. Second, and the last point I want to make, and the whole thing that I want to show in the 3 slides that I have is, hey, look, Hong Kong's international profile has not been improving. And we need to, nowadays, it's not just simply saying that, internationalization is still a competitive advantage, we're still doing very well. In fact, we need to catch up. we need to catch up what we have left 15 years earlier, and then we need to catch up and we need to further progress. And that's the point I want to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Lei, for generous saving us a lot of time so that we can have more time for Q&A. Now it's the Q&A time. Now before I open the floor to the participant on site and on Zoom, I'd like to take the privilege of being the moderator to ask some questions. Now, my first, I would like to use Dr. Hong's presentation as the starting point for my question. My first question, actually, no, it goes to Professor Anthony Zhang, also Professor Sun, also Professor Lei, because I think the three of your presentation have shown with us a lot of the macro, structural environment that Hong Kong is now facing. Right, I think the keywords from your presentation is a lot of uncertainty facing Hong Kong ahead, and then government has to do something right to overcome this kind of challenge. And then in Dr. Hong's presentation, I think she suggested a paradigm shift that Hong Kong government should play a more assertive, active role in promoting Hong Kong's economic growth. And I want to seek your comments on the suggestion of paradigm shift, because in your presentation, I think in Anthony's and also Professor's presentation, we all mentioned that Hong Kong should develop a quite conducive ecosystem. Right. My question is that, do you think that this kind of assertive and active role of Hong Kong as a government is an important part of the ecosystem that you are suggesting?
I think if we want to intensively groom a particular industry, so in my presentation I was referring to fostering innovation technology as the new industry by the current administration. It's not just launching a plan. It's not just saying, well, we grab more professional talent in this area. It's not just government willing to spend money, although money is not unlimited. I think it has more, ultimately, it has more to do with the ecosystem. Now, if we have an ecosystem which belongs to the past era, I don't think change will really take place. And it takes time, it takes patience, and you cannot expect quick win. I think at the moment, the government is too much in the mode, although I can understand why, of quick spend and quick win, hoping for quick win. And that will not happen. So we will always be behind. And of course, if you want to have the real win, which takes time, you need people to be patient. You need people to be willing to wait for the outcome. So we are sort of planting the seeds, hoping one day we can harvest. I mean, if you look at Shenzhen, for example, Shenzhen started this Silicon Valley, which is the term that we use now, but it started off not sort of hoping that it would become the Silicon Valley. We just picked this particular area of neo-industrialization, and it takes several years before some signs of prosperity, if you like, can be seen. Now, if I, having listened to the various among these speakers, I think to me, one particular point stands out. That first of all, we are facing challenges like any other economies, the world. But in the case of Hong Kong, we are sort of doing worse than others, despite this general sort of gloomy worldwide economic situation. So what makes Hong Kong worse compared to others over the last few years? And we might say, well, we all share COVID, so that's a common factor. But what makes us worse, in my view, is how attitude, behavior, perceptions have changed because of 2019. I think we have to admit that. That is a major factor that could largely explain why we are doing worse than others. Now, if that's the case, then I'm sure our solution must partly be able to address 2019. because of, brain drain, for example. Now, there are many factors because to explain the brain drain. But certainly, we must not gloss over 2019 and imagine, well, that has no impact at all. Now, if that has an impact, then we have to look into it and study how can we turn it around. That's why in my presentation I said, although the main challenge is economic, the solution must be partly political. Otherwise, we cannot get us back to the foot, despite all the goodwill, despite our willingness to spend money, even though money is limited. We are now having very ambitious plans to develop the northern metropolis, for example. Now, that's important for Hong Kong. I fully support that direction. However, the development of the northern metropolis cannot rely on government efforts alone. You cannot rely on money from the government alone. It must come from the private sector. And our private enterprises very positive about it? Are they willing to put a lot of money into it in view of the current economic situation? Now, that is the question that we have to really consider seriously.
Actually, the Hong Kong government proposed that Hong Kong would be an international technology and innovation center. This is nothing new, actually. If you check the first policy address released by Mr. Dong Jianhua, he mentioned Hong Kong should be develop the high-tech industries also. And in Zheng Yingquan, Jiangzhen stage, we have 6, advantage industries, also including in technology, high-tech industry development. The reality is that after 26 years, nothing happened. It shows us clearly with reality that, in Hong Kong, nothing will happen without government interference in this area. Because as I just said, capitals flowing Hong Kong never take roots. But for high-tech industry development, we need patient, long-term investment. We need investment that can accept high risks. In Hong Kong, we are not short of capital that pursue short, term risks. It's not natural in Hong Kong that the capital will sit here with so long for the R&D to be turned into return. And another area I would like to mention, if you see our competitors all over the world, most of them have a national innovation system with government initiatives in mapping out the blueprint in But Hong Kong, without such a guidance, naturally the market will not grow out such kind of vision to compete in technological development. So I totally agree with Professor Zhang that we need an ecosystem. But as an initial step, the government must play a role.
I tend to think that that there are several levels of engagement by the government. One is obviously you simply comment in quantitative terms a large amount of money, so that you would have money, resources, and see if you can push development. Of course, as we can see already from one of the slides put forward by Yunming, is that you need the private sector to respond as well. So simply the government probably would not be able to make very drastic changes. The second level, I think, probably is one of the very original and important initiative put forward by Wendy is about new tools. You need to have new tools to help the government to do certain things, like the certain kind of investment fund, so that that kind of investment fund would not just investing in the local economy, but also look for opportunities abroad and seek returns. Otherwise, the money would dry out. And having the tools, I think, would also be important, and this is one also very important steps in reshaping the ecosystem. But I think all the way further down, you need to have a new conceptualization of the role of the state. I mean, for people here, of course, probably people would think that, all of us here that's living in the ivory tower and so on and so forth. But still, I think in the ivory tower, there's still some sort of wisdom, is that if you really want to become a developmental state, you need not only a new mindset, but also the readiness to really make the best use of state initiative to make positive change. And this required, I feel to say, not simply resources, but some kind of wisdom. So, for example, when I was hearing all these new ideas about the northern metropolis, I was wondering that, do we need to put a university or 8 universities near the border and in the northern part of Hong Kong? I tend to think not, because if you really think about mainland international talents going to work in the northern metropolis and also live there, all these high-end talents have their families, right, and have their children. And these people are looking for good schools for the kids. So actually what you need is not a university, but you need good secondary schools, good primary schools to put there. And unfortunately, most of our prestigious secondary and primary schools, most of the time would be in Kowloon Peninsula and in Hong Kong Island. So you really want to convince the high-income, high talents to live in the northern part of it. Actually, it's very difficult. And if you set up the university along the border, and this defeat a lot of the ideas about having non-local students. Quite honestly, for other countries like the UK, they would be very honest. What's the purpose of having all these self-financing overseas students? You read them off. Not only in terms of tuition fee, but these people going to stay in the dormitory, and then you need to pay. And that's why in UK you have proliferations of all kinds of private hostels in London, in Manchester, and this helped to support one of the interesting points mentioned again by Yan Ming is the response in the real estate market. You make money out of it. If you set up all the 8 universities closer to the border, I'm sure that most of the students would live in Shenzhen or Dongguan instead of staying in Hong Kong and then spend money. Well, I'm half joking, but the point I want to make is, if you all the way from different levels, you have governments, engagements, and initiatives. You really need to be strategic and to be clever about what you want to get out of it. Instead of, a lot of times, I think in Hong Kong, it's very typical of us is like to talk in very broad terms, so that even though the statistics telling another story, we will still be happy. Like what I just said, we should focus on regional headquarters, but you bring in local offices so that everything is still growing. Same thing, for a long time, we talk about non-local students, because we know a lot of the non-local students are actually from mainland, not international. But by changing the term from international to non-local, everything is doing all right, nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about the international profile and so on and so forth. So you need to be sharp and you need to be clever. And this is the thing that probably when you engage the government more at different levels, you need to really spell out resources, you have the tools, and then you have the vision, and then you have the plan, and you have the details, and then it would work.
I think I have a follow-up question. I think because most of you agree that the active role of state should be an important part of the ecosystem, right? At least the starting point of the development of the ecosystem. I'm a little concerned about the potential effect of public investment on private investment. I think we all see in Professor Sun's presentation that In Hong Kong, when during the past decades, when public investment expanded, at the same time there was a contraction of private investment. So my question is it really so active state in economic development? Is it really a proper strategy for Hong Kong? Because when we compare Hong Kong with Singapore, now Singapore and Hong Kong have different kind of ownership structure. Right? Singapore economy is dominated by multinational corporation, also by government-linked corporation, right? State-owned enterprises. But in Hong Kong, I think Hong Kong economy has been driven by numerous small and medium-sized private enterprises. So will there be a concern that if the state is more inactive, right, in expanding its presence in the economy, and then that will crowd out private enterprises or private incentives?
Try to answer this question. I think what the Hong Kong Investment Corporation should do is not to establish some state-owned companies like in the mainland. It should play a very critical role in attract some so-called supply chain anchors to Hong Kong. Industries development in clusters and in supply chains. And you cannot just, in Hong Kong, if you only, play a very small role, you must link to the supply chain. That if we can attract those supply chain anchors to Hong Kong, they have the power to command, their upstream and downstream suppliers and service providers. And this will help Hong Kong to be hooked into the total supply chain. If we can even attract some, anchors to set up major operation in Hong Kong, will attract upstream and downstream players to cluster around such anchors and then become a sustainable supply chain. So I think the government investment fund is not to use to set up a company and run by itself. We must use the funds wisely and cleverly to leverage, the supply chain and build up this cluster in Hong Kong.
I don't think Hong Kong can simply copy the Singapore model because the economic structure is so different. And in terms of drivers of growth, in Singapore, the GLCs, government-linked corporations, play a very important role. And we don't have that in Hong Kong. And even if we now think that we should have more state-owned enterprises, it's too late. We are preempted by the status quo. However, I agree that in order to groom an ecosystem which is more conducive to innovation technology, maybe not more conducive to the new industries, reindustrialization, if you like, then certainly government has to play a larger role. And this role is not just in terms of government pumping money into the various sectors. As pointed out by Dialogue, government needs to have the strategic wisdom, the mindset, where to put the money, first of all. Now, that requires strategy. A strategy that is almost the same as a strategy behind a business person's mind. So government cannot think of putting money into new investment simply as an administrative act. I think that's the kind of limitation that we had in the past. I hope the things will be changing. Secondly, we have to accept that in terms of investment, even in Silicon Valley, if you try 10 projects, maybe 9 will fail, and only 1 will succeed. Now, under Hong Kong's current audit system in government, will that be allowed? Now, that's another question. So a lot of mindset changes that are needed, and also the skills. I don't think that up to the most recently, I don't think that our bureaucracy is used to that kind of investment decision making. Because whenever we wanted in the past, whenever we wanted to enter into new areas, we always ask an outside consultant, do a feasibility study for us, and then let us know what are the options. And then we try to come up with the answer. Now, the actual compilation of the feasibility study report is not an outcome of internal government efforts, but more an external advice. So again, we lack that kind of internal capacity. So I think there are a lot of things that we need to groom in order to be able to have the capacity to support a more active government. Active not in terms of SOEs, but even putting in money in the right places. I think that's important. And over the last few years, apart from COVID, government has spent a lot of money. But I would say that in some areas, the money has not been well spent. So that is a challenge to us, even if we are resource rich.
My observation of our discussion in this panel, I think Anthony and Wendy are basically arguing that the government has to be assuming a kind of enabling role. I don't think that they're talking about the government becoming very encompassing and taking over everything, but how to enable new economic initiatives, how to enable certain kind of connection with the global supply chain, clustering, and so on. You need to have an enabler. I think that is very important. But at the same time, I think the last point made by Anthony would be very important is when we have resources, when we have the tools ready to enable, at the end of the day, you still need to have the strategic mindset. You like it or not, you still need to be selective. You can't invest in everything. The current discussion in the government about new industries that worries me is not because they have been too restrictive. It is because simply too broad. We want to do medical, we want to do pharmacy, we want to do IT, we want to do this, we want to do that. All over the places, everything on the table. I can bear it, but at the end, 5 years down the road, don't tell me that everything wins. If that do, I think, of course, that would be all right. We would be very rich and prosperous. But definitely, you invest in 10 projects, probably 3 of them would have good results. You probably should congratulate yourself and celebrate.
I want to add a few words. Actually, like Professor Lee said, government should play an enabling role and should have a strategic thinking. Sometimes such an enabling role is not, played through investments at all. You can have some strategy to attract, the high-tech players come to Hong Kong. As I mentioned in my presentation, the Chapter 18A of the board ruling. Actually, I'm proposing a reform of the Chapter 18A and the Chapter 18C. If we can have, if there, here is the normal entry requirements. If we can have a new entry requirement, which is much lower, but the actual requirement is you must come to Hong Kong. You must set up real operation in Hong Kong. You don't need to always pour money to do things, but the strategic thinking is, critical in every aspect of the ecosystem.
Thank you. Is Professor still online?
Yeah.
Can I have an input on my question?
Yeah. I think, okay.
Because in your presentation, you show a slide that from 2020 to 2012 to 2022, that with the expansion of the share of public investment, the total investment in Hong Kong increased while the ratio for private investment declined. Now, could you please give us your interpretation of this kind of pattern?
You just said that. The private sector has not responded so far. But the reasons. We don't really know. What the real reasons are. Probably a lot of things that they have just said. By Anthony and dialogue and so on, are true. That the government doesn't have a strategic mindset. Unlike Singapore, that, of course, I mean, firstly, I mean, the government in Hong Kong has much fewer resources than that in Singapore. For example, if you talk about, I mean, Temasek, okay, that in Hong Kong, I mean, the closest institution that is analogous is the Future Fund, 未來基金 under the financial secretary. I mean, the amount of this future fund is only, I think, less than 5% of that of the resources of Temasek. Simply because, of course, Temasek has control a lot more resources. I mean, has access to the Provident Fund of, I mean, the workers of Singapore, that they have a public provident fund, whereas in Hong Kong, I mean, all provident funds are, or most provident funds are private, that the government, I mean, does not control, whereas the Singapore government, I mean, has a control of a huge pool of people's saving. So I mean, the objective conditions are all different. They control a lot more resources in Singapore, of course. But I think more importantly, I mean, as Anthony and Dialogue has also said, I mean, the mindset is different. That the Hong Kong government doesn't have a strategic mindset. They don't have a feel of what industry, I mean, should be developed in Hong Kong. I mean, they always ask for feasibility studies, external inputs. Well, kind of, if you look at, I mean, kind of the culture of Hong Kong and Singapore, of course, I mean, things are very different. Kind of in Singapore, the most competent, the best performing youths in Singapore, they go into the civil service. Whereas in Hong Kong, I mean, mostly, in a lot of cases, most of our best performing youths go into the private sector. And instead of the government sector, the government is more an administrative, as Anthony has just said. I mean, do a lot of auditing, transparency, fair play, and what have you. And it is not any kind of an entrepreneurial government. And in fact, very few governments in the world are entrepreneurial, I mean, for obvious reasons. And the government of Hong Kong is has been, I mean, all these years, mostly administrative. And it is very difficult to change. And that's fine. I mean, in the last couple of years, I mean, the government has been trying to do a lot more, has been more proactive, trying to attract a lot of enterprises to come into Hong Kong. They mostly, I mean, do a lot of PR, go on trips to Saudi Arabia, to Southeast Asia, I mean, to sell Hong Kong, and mostly PR efforts. And, but I mean, for Hong Kong, the develop an innovative sector, we need more than that. And I think Dialogue and Anthony has touched on, I mean, a lot of more our constraints. And I think realistically, we cannot, I mean, just hope that the government will transform itself. I mean, suddenly metamorphose from an administrative government into an entrepreneurial government. That won't happen. And though, of course, there are some crucial facets that we can add on. I mean, such as, I mean, Wendy has talked about, I mean, financial regulations, such as, I mean, changing some of our financial regulation on listing and so on. Maybe that can generate more innovative activity in Hong Kong. So I mean, there are various levels that we can talk about, and but I think it is not realistic to hope that Hong Kong will suddenly be transformed into a Silicon Valley in a short span of time. And that is just not realistic.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I want to ask one more question before I open the floor to other participants. My next question is about the what's the real competitive advantage of Hong Kong in the so-called post-COVID new normal? Right, we all know that in the past, Hong Kong has done quite well in economic growth. When we talk about Hong Kong economy, we often use some keywords like flexibility, cost sensitivity, market acumen. Right, so Hong Kong economy can adapt to external environment change very quickly, efficiently. But now in the and also, I think the Professor also mentioned that Hong Kong and mainland China has been the major beneficiary of hyper-globalization in Europe. But now, I think the rule of the game in the global business world has changed. So nowadays, in global supply chain, in global production network, so different countries are talking about onshore, reshore, or some kind of talk about friendshoring. So this is not purely business. When you do transaction with other partners, you have to take into account their ideology, their value judgment, and so on and so forth. So my question is that in this kind of new world of production, what's the real competitive advantage of Hong Kong's economy?
Well, I think we as a city, our core advantage remains the same, despite the external environment. Whether that environment is of an advantage to us or maybe more adverse right now because of geopolitics, because of the political situation. Now, the core advantage is that China is always the opportunity for us, even before reform and opening up. Because in the last few decades, we like to say, well, when China is good, Hong Kong is good. When I remember when Tung Chee-hwa became chief executive, said, in the past, Hong Kong was good, China was good, and then if China was good, then Hong Kong would be good. Now, in the 1950s, 60s, when China, with the mainland went through political troubles, social troubles, precisely because of that, Hong Kong got the opportunity to prosper. So Hong Kong's future, Hong Kong's growth has always been linked to China. So I think that's important. That's a starting point. So location is important. However, Hong Kong must be able to do things that mainland cities are not good at. So we must decide, well, where is our comparative advantage vis-a-vis the mainland? If Hong Kong cannot do things that Shenzhen can do, Shanghai can do, Hong Kong is of no advantage. So we have to ask ourselves, where are we good at? We are well placed in terms of location. In terms of people, we must be able to attract people from everywhere. Now, because in the past it was so easy, we did not need to launch any special scheme to attract them. They were attracted by opportunities here. Now, if they have to be induced by monetary incentives, that means the opportunities are not apparent to them. So we have to ask, in the new normal, in this kind of geopolitics, can we still create new opportunities? What are they? Now, if we can answer that question, that is a very important, very good storyline to tell. When we say we need to tell the Hong Kong story, it's not the peak again, it's not shopping, it's what are the opportunities, areas for imagination. And then the market. I think the market is important. Don't underestimate the market in the past. Now, whatever government can do, I agree government should do more, but ultimately, we need the market, we need the private sector to contribute, to take part. Now, are the private companies as optimistic in Hong Kong's future as before? I think that will be the question. So that's why in my presentation I said, well, there are things related to the political scene in broad terms. So we must not take that casually. But of course, the pressing issue is mostly economic. And the economic challenge is also affecting our public finance. And if we don't have a healthy state of public finance, that will affect what government can deliver to ordinary people, and livelihood may be affected. It's all together. It's all linked together. So my point is, we still have the same core advantage as in the past, in terms of location, in terms of people, in terms of the market. But can we make this work in the new normal? I think that's the major challenge to both the government and society at large.
I would like to give you an example on Hong Kong's advantage. I'm currently in touch with around 6 or 7 satellite companies. They have planned to come to Hong Kong to set up manufacturing base in Hong Kong and manufacture satellites. You know why? Why Hong Kong? Those companies are mainly, from mainland. But in mainland China, data cross-border flow is strictly, managed. We have cybersecurity law, we have data security law, we have a lot of rules, and data cross-border flow is impossible. But for satellite industry, what they produce is data. They launched the they launched the satellite in the sky and collect data and provide all kinds of services. If you build up your base in mainland China, you cannot do international services. So many companies are coming to Hong Kong. They would like to explore international market, so-called oil one. Actually, we are developing into a digital economy. Data has become the critical, factor of production. And Hong Kong is a place where data currently can flow freely across the border, in and out. This gives us a very, prominent advantage in the digital economy. So I proposed to the CE, Hong Kong should define ourselves as an international data port. If with appropriate software and hardware, Hong Kong can, diversify our economic structure and build new, competitiveness in such a digital economy.
For this kind of data company, when they set up in Hong Kong, they might face some kind of barrier, obstacle when they want to establish some kind of office affiliates in the Western world, in US or in UK.
Yes, but those companies are targeting at countries like Africa, like Asia, mainly One Belt and One Road companies, particularly those countries that are lagging behind in 5G, in internet connection. From the satellite, you can provide connections, cover even the mountains, areas, and oceans. So this is a new solution that will disrupt the traditional, system. So we are targeting at those kind of countries.
Thank you.
Well, just very briefly, that's relatedly, that's a very interesting question, because we have long talked about geopolitics, but we don't normally talk about geoeconomics. But in fact, in this new reconstituted globalized world, apparently political factors coming in, and then market becoming, or internationalization becoming something more restrictive than what we used to have in the 80s and especially in the 90s and year 2000. And how Hong Kong repositioned itself inevitably, primarily in the role of being in between, and find the in between, find a new in between Hong Kong, China on one side, and it's not about the rest of the world, but which part of the world, what sort of services. I think that would be important. So to answer your question, one of the competitive advantage of Hong Kong is being fluid fluidity probably is more important than flexibility nowadays.
Thank you. So although I have more questions to ask, I think I should be very nice to open the floor. So any question from the participant on site and also on Zoom? Yeah.
I'm Ricky. I'm the founder of the newly established non-profit making culture and media company, and doing the same things as all the speakers used to do. And before I speak, I need to declare my interest. I need to declare that I'm a die-hard fan of Professor Lam, Professor Loy, and Professor Zhang. Wherever they conduct the seminar, where I am, I will come back to Hong Kong and attend the seminar. In my humble view, all the speakers' views and suggestions are very, very enlightening. And I use the word just by Professor Chung, added value and meaningful. And definitely, I will record all what you said when I go back to my family, to my company, and talk to my team. And I have two questions to ask. One, in particular, I want to ask the view of Professor Law. And the other one, concerning governmency, I want Professor Chung can answer me. And it's out of my surprise, Professor Law mentioned about 8 universities in Hong Kong in future will group in a very remote utilitarian area. Let me tell you my feeling as a Hong Kongers. I'm very proud of Hong Kong. One of the reasons because we have 8 beautiful, outstanding universities. And talking about beautiful, I don't think I need to say anything. You just look around and you know the reason. Many visitors come to Hong Kong, go to one by one the university to take pictures. And take for example, Hong Kong University. A lot of antique building, they go there just to picture, to show that they already been to one of the Hong Kong prestigious university. They will power it. But I don't know wisdom. Why we remove all these 8 beautiful universities with different architecture, different design, different thing, and group it in one area? I can see the wisdom of it. So, doing so, I think, in my humble view, we lost one of the beautiful landmarks in Hong Kong. And I'm quite sad about it. And would Professor Locke give me some insight?
Well, I'm not saying the government is going to do that. They just initially saying that there probably will be a new university town there, probably not used by all 8 universities, and they have not said anything about dropping the current campuses and so on. But I criticize them. The idea is because I said if you are really importing talents and then you really think very strategically, and also thinking that the Northern Metropolis would become a center of new industries as well as the residential areas of the talents, probably these people are looking for primary school and secondary schools rather than universities. So I don't think they have already finalized how to use the space, but at this stage they did throw out the idea that perhaps there would be a university site over there. How big? Don't know. How they manage it? Don't know.
Thank you, Professor Lui. What you said put my mind in this, and tonight I will have a good sleep. Another thing I want to ask Professor Chung is concerning governmency. I think Professor Chung would agree with me. Even government itself cannot restore all the economy and the goodwill of Hong Kong without the support of Hong Kong citizens. And in my humble view, there's a lot of misunderstanding between the Hong Kong government announcement and the Hong Kong citizen. In particular, I'm very concerned about the property developer because they will be one of the gumshoe to restore economy. I wonder why, when everybody looking for the direction of our government, and take for instance, the housing problem is the most problematic area in Hong Kong. And according to my calculation, there's only 300,000 family lack of accommodation. So if the government is a sensible one, they only build 300,000 public housing, and then they can accommodate every needed family in Hong Kong. That's why the government announced they want to build in 10 years' time 400,000 units. So what did it have to do with the 100,000 units? And as if I'm a developer, I will lose confidence. So, and I think this is not a bad policy, but of course I haven't got the wisdom as our chief executive. But the government need to explain to citizens why they have such a policy. Another one is CAPEX. I think it makes a lot of people suffering.
Could you please go direct? Sorry, we are running out of time. Could you please go direct to your question?
The direct question is, the government is lack of transparency. And I want Professor Zhang can tell how can make the government policy and suggestion more transparent.
I think perhaps I just want to share with information. There will be another post-dialogue on public policy and the changing order on March 2 next year, 2024. I think so that might be the good location to answer a question. But maybe
a very quick response. First of all, I think I know something about the figure for housing because when I was secretary for transparent housing, we started the long-term housing strategy, the new long-term housing strategy at that time. And then we sort of worked out the 10-year rolling 10-year forecast for new housing. And in my time, it was something like 450,000 or even further. And it's not just based on those households who are currently staying in inadequate housing, such as subdivided units, townhome. The figure also covers new household formation, migrants coming to Hong Kong, including students, for example, visitors settling in Hong Kong. So it's more than those who are inadequately housed. And in any case, housing is not just about number. If we have more land, we could provide more spacious housing units. So same number, but more spacious. But that requires land. So I'm all in favor of government trying its best to grab more land. Right? So, and in my experience, it always takes time more than expected to get the land, to get new units built. So we should not be too complacent and tell ourselves, okay, we have got enough land. So keep on getting more land. I think that's important. And I agree with you that government should be more transparent, to tell the story more effectively in simple terms to ordinary people.
I think we are running out of time, but I think we should still entertain one question in the chat room. There's a question from Albert. I think the question goes to Dr. Kung, right? It's called the look is IFC, International Financial Center, and the Wimbledon effect may be a bit contrary to what mentioned in Professor Shun's presentation. Does it mean that we should spend more international financial outreach rather than focus on local development? Right. So can this be rationalized and explained? I think the question is quite related to your personality, Professor Sun.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for your question. What I'm proposing is to add an extra dimension of local development on top of the international dimension. I'm not talking about sacrificing our international connection and focus on the local development. But as I have elaborated in my presentation, during the centuries, the capital flow on Hong Kong has not connected with local development, and Hong Kong evolved into two detached Hong Kongs in the parallel universe. And, we should make good use of our advantage, that is the financial services, to help local development, to diversify local economic base. So what I'm suggesting is, you go ahead on two ways, both global and local.
Excuse me, can I join here?
Question from
Can I
Nikki.
join in?
And that policy suggests that was released a few days express strong signals of attracting talents in what fields, but he or she knows a lot of friends applied for talent schemes successfully, and then they left Hong Kong after they become permanent residents. So, in your opinion, what should the government do to keep talents, retain talents?
Well, I think very briefly is that the government really need to be strategic and clever in designing all these new initiatives and how to be more clever. One way is simply know the people who are interested in becoming a PR in Hong Kong. Otherwise, I know of a lot of people apply for the talent scheme coming to Hong Kong is primarily for children's education in Hong Kong rather than they are interested in developing their career here. Or that we don't really have other things to convince them to stay behind. For example, in Hong Kong, for our local universities, we started to recruit postgraduate research students from mainland since the 80s. Especially after the late 1980s. For a long period of time, we actually never bother whether they would stay behind or not and what kind of programs that we need here. So as a result, I remember in my previous universities, I bumped into a student who was very talented in physics, but that was way back in the late 1990s and early 20s. And then after finish all his research, and he find that, actually Hong Kong is not looking for him. No one is interested in pure physics. And then he asked me, why you give me the scholarship and come over and spend something like 4 or 5 years doing my research here. I thought you were interested in keeping me behind. And in fact, you just say, thanks for coming. You've done a good job. Goodbye. Take care. So at the end of the day, very simple that, if you really want to attract talents, then of course you should think about keeping them. By keeping them, it means that you need to know them, their concerns, not just one type, but many types. So as a result, you have corresponding arrangements so that, these people would be happy to stay behind at the same time would benefit Hong Kong.
Thank you. Although I have a lot more questions to ask, I think we are running out of time. So I'd like to thank all the 4 distinguished speakers for the enlightening sharing. And also would like to thank all the participants on site and also on Zoom for your participation. And I would like to make an announcement because this is just the first session of this year's Post-Dialogue series. And please stay tuned, and then more Post-Dialogues are coming. The next Post-Dialogue will be on Hong Kong in Great Bay Area, a pioneer or follow. It will be held on November 18. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the staff and colleagues at the Division of Public Policy at Hong Kong UST, and also the Department of Social Science and Post-Study at EdUHK for making this Policy Dialogue series possible. Thank you all, and all the best. Thank you. Bye-bye.